The entire shore area has been hit with devaluation. You can't tax somebody who doesn't have a house there anymore, or his house is totally destroyed. Both counties are suffering from the county perspective, and the local towns are suffering because they have to reduce their tax base, and that ends up, somebody has to pay for it. You still have to pay for the policeman, you still have to pay for the fire department, you still have to pay for the first aid and everything else like that. The people who were second homeowners in the wealthier communities really in some cases didn't have to wait for insurance. They were self-insured and just rebuilt, as opposed to working people that had to rely on government and insurance companies, whether it was FEMA for flood insurance or their own insurance company to pay for the repairs. And that has been a very long, slow process. Many of my constituents are working people that are waiting for money to come in from the federal government, and are concerned that after they fix up their homes, are they going to afford to be able to live there, because they have a mortgage. And can they afford the high cost of insurance to be able to protect their home? Because if you have a mortgage, you must have flood insurance. This is everyone's shore. And it is our responsibility, both to this generation and future generations, to make sure it is protected and taken care of properly. I think there's a lot of things we have to learn from, prepare for God forbid, the next storm. Number one is we realize the storms are more frequent and they're more severe. Take a look at your rainstorms, and they're stronger and far more severe than I can remember. And therefore we have to realize that. Number two, I think we have to also be realistic, is with all these things happening, what do we have to do? Number one is we have to take a look at our infrastructure. Let's look at best practice. Let's look at the power companies in states that unfortunately see a lot of storms, whether it's Louisiana, whether it's Florida, whether it's California. Let's take a look at their power companies and see what their best practices, and adopt those best practices to our power companies here, and make sure they adhere to that. We had a disaster here. We had to wait for allocations from the federal government before money started flowing. Part of it was that the flood insurance fund was broke. Well, think about that. That delay has caused havoc to a lot of people. We had 40,000 people displaced from the storm that were living in rental properties, living with families and friends all over the state, and there still are some of them. I've got people that still can't live in the bottom half of their house because it was damaged, and they can't do anything until they get the money, because they're not allowed to fix it. So they have to wait till they get the money to fix it, and they're still waiting. If this money had been there already, and it was just a question of being able to allocate it immediately, a lot of this would have been taken care of already. Because it's coming in waves, because we had to wait for federal government to vote on it, then they didn't vote on it. These things that have absolutely hurt the communities and hurt the individuals. And I believe that had there been that pot of money there already, a lot more people would have been helped already. We have to create the fund. We can't go back into further debt right now as a country. We have to look at that situation. We have to be realistic about it. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the last storm. But I think there has to be immediate relief, and we have to look at a way to fund it on a permanent basis, on an ongoing basis, so that people will know, God, with this disaster, there's relief coming immediately, not waiting for, as I said before, Congress to pass it, not waiting that someone throws something into a bill to do something for their home state and gets sidetracked as opposed to where the money's supposed to go for. So the answer is yes, we have to look at all avenues. We have to make an intelligent decision based on what is best for the people of the country, as a countrywide situation, and people have to understand nationwide, it can happen to them. You know, I've lived down the shore for 40 years. We never had a storm like this, and people just didn't believe it was ever going to happen. And you know, that's why people got trapped, and we had to rescue things, and everything else happened because people just couldn't imagine. We couldn't imagine this is what's going to happen. They couldn't imagine the amount of tornadoes we had this year in the Midwest. No one can envision that or think about that. So we have to understand is things can happen. Any place in the country, unfortunately, with what is changing climate factors and storms and everything else like that. And we have to understand this has to be a permanent solution so that people don't have to worry in the future.